We'll begin with the meetings between the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission this week, and both NASA and Jubilee. There were separate meetings, but in those meetings, IEBC chairperson Wafula Chebukati, they are saying they had reached a consensus with the opposition, but just moments later, NASA presidential candidate Raila Odinga saying no progress has been made. Let's just listen in to what the two had to say.
And so between today and tomorrow, we shall publish what we have agreed with the NASA team.
All right, we do apologize for that. That is our Wafula Chebukati there. Just trying to say some of it, that they had gotten to a consensus with the NASA team. Let me first introduce my panelists here in studio. We have lawyer Nelson Having. Many thanks for joining us on the State of the Nation.
Thank you, Michelle.
As well as Senator Samson Cherargei, who is the Senator of Nandi. Many thanks for joining us in studio. So let's begin with that meeting between IEBC and NASA before we get to the meeting between IEBC and Jubilee. Nelson, Chebukati seems to say they had reached a consensus with the opposition on some of the irreducible minimums that had been laid out by the opposition. Raila Odinga, on the other hand, says we have not agreed until we really agree. The aim of this meeting was to tone down the hardline stances being held by the NASA team. The country is not seeing that being done. Why is that?
Well, clearly, either one of these individuals is not telling us the truth, or for a fact there is no consensus. Because if there was a consensus on the main issue that had been put forth for discussion by the NASA coalition, and there was an agreement in the manner in which Wafula Chebukati says one was reached, then nothing would have been easier than for him to indicate a memorandum duly signed by both the IEBC and the NASA coalition, indicating that, look, these are the areas that had been listed for discussion. We've come together on these particular points. These particular points are outstanding. But look, the main contention that has been put forward by the NASA coalition has been on the credibility of the manner in which this election is supposed to be conducted. Al Ghuraya, who printed the ballot boxes, Safran Mofo, who was entrusted with the responsibility of the transmission, appear from the evidence that was tendered before the Supreme Court, and even what we see currently as issues for discussion, to have bungled this entire election. And I think the demands by NASA have been quite straightforward and clear, that if it is in respect of Safran Mofo, we need these kits configured. We need a thorough forensic audit to ensure that the problem we had last time is not repeated. As regards Al Ghuraya, it is quite evident that the NASA coalition will not be comfortable with Al Ghuraya printing the ballot boxes. And there are many reasons for this. Because during the hearing of the case before the Supreme Court, it became quite apparent that some of the forms that were relied upon were actually forgeries. And the IEBC did not come out quite clear as to who was responsible for this forgery. Did the documents emanate elsewhere, or did Al Ghuraya bungle the printing of these ballot papers? And then look at the 1.2 million extra ballot boxes, papers that were printed by Al Ghuraya. Before we went to this election, a question was posed to Wafula Chebukati. How will you deal with these extra 1.2 million papers that appear not to be justified because they do not fall within the threshold of the margin of error? He said, we will account for them. I mean, look, it's almost 2 months down the lane. He's never accounted for them. And in light of all this bad record that appears apparent on the face of these two institutions, it is quite clear that over and above the exit of Ezra Chiloba and many election officials who are culpable in respect of this particular bungling exercise have to go, then these two corporations have a lot that needs to be done. And unless and until this is done to the satisfaction, and the satisfaction is just not for the satisfaction of NASA, it's for the satisfaction of Kenyans. Because it cannot be said that NASA speaks for itself. It speaks for a very big population of Kenyans.
All right. I want us to come back to that, because NASA is the same team that has been asking the IEBC to stamp its independence, stamp its authority, not to play to the tune of the Jubilee Party. And we're seeing it, of course, giving forth its irreducible minimums, which it is allowed to do, but seemingly saying we are not happy with the manner in which you have handled our irreducible minimums, and you must fulfill these irreducible minimums in this and this way. So we'll be discussing that in a moment. But let's first listen in to what Raila Odinga had to say.
Those protests shall therefore continue across the country every Monday and Friday in accordance with the law. It is self-evident that the police have been systematically and consistently trigger-happy against unarmed peaceful NASA supporters and have unleashed brutal force against innocent civilians, including young university students.
Again, as we said, our submission was very restricted to areas we felt we could add improvement, but areas of also support. So we do.
But the same Jubilee is standing with the people like Ezra Chiloba and the IEBC that committed irregularities and illegalities in the elections. This trend has to stop, but it will not stop on its own. We must stop it. Do not be cheated that NASA has some agreement with IEBC and that there is some progress that we are party to. We have no such agreement, and our faith in IEBC remains zero.
All right, so Raila Odinga, they're saying the agreement with IEBC still remains zero. Let me come to you, Senator Cherarkei. Your name is rather hard to pronounce. What do you make of the stance being taken by NASA so far, considering that the meeting was meant to really tone down these hardline positions?
Thank you very much for having me this morning. I think the stand taken by NASA is interesting because they appear subdued even before the game starts. From the onset, us as Jubilee, we don't have irreducible minimums or any conditions because we believe in the independence of the IEBC. And we have already insisted because some of these demands that NASA are giving to IEBC are in some way trying to compromise the entire process, because when you look at some of these demands, they are very ridiculous. They don't have any basis. But in the hindsight, we tried and assisted them. We have moved to court, we have moved to Senate and the National Assembly and tried to fortify some of these conditions they are bringing in. They said no reforms, no elections. We are trying to reform the electoral process through the amendments that we have brought in Parliament to ensure the process is fair and credible. We agree as what the Supreme Court said, although we criticize, and it is very interesting because the Jubilee side, when they criticize the Supreme Court decision, the people, the same people are quick to tell us, you know, judiciary is independent. But when now we tell them, don't interfere with the process of the IEBC, they are telling us, no, we must give conditions. And therefore, these positions being taken to NASA, you know, some of these things are interesting. Because when they talk about Ezra Chiloba and the 12 officials, in fact, before the full judgment was read, it is the same people said we have a list of 12 officials. The big question is, how did they know that there were 12 people, including Praxidis Terore, Kasaiti, Mohati, and the rest? And one interesting thing about those 12 officials, they were ethnically profiled based on the perception that some of these officials were perceived to be supporting a particular certain political entity. So when you look at some of these demands, they are not realistic. They cannot be met at any given time because NASA has realized 26. In the less than 20 days, Jubilee will not win only this time round with 1.5 million votes, but they will win with 3 million. And that is why we are telling them they can as much as, and I like, by the way, he has said, we will not participate in the elections. The goodness, they have not said there will be no election. So we expect now that they are saying we are not participating in the election. They should just do the honor because Raila is the father of democracy. He should write to IEBC chairman Wafula Chebukati and tell him I will not participate in this election. And we go in and swear in the
I want to focus on some of the irreducible minimums. But we'll come back to what you said, because you say Jubilee does not have any irreducible minimums because you trust the independence of the independence of the IEBC. But some of the proposed amendments to the electoral laws are largely still touching on the IEBC, something that's likely to affect its independence. We'll come back to that. But let's come back to you, Javi. I want to take a look at the front page of the Standard, because it has laid down rather well the demands laid out by NASA and the response that has been given by the IEBC. So let's take a look at whether these demands have been met or not. One of the demands, which has seen demonstrations continue even tomorrow, is the removal of top officials, including IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba. In response to that, IEBC says there is an election project team that has been set aside, led by Hussein Marjan, who already appointed and will report directly to the chair of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. IEBC seems to say that they have tried to partially meet this demand by NASA after the removal of top officials, seemingly say that Ezra Chiloba will not be playing a central role in this election, but the project team leader, Hussein Marjan. What do you make of that?
Well, I think it's not in the realm of conjecture that Ezra Chiloba is the blue-eyed boy, not the blue-eyed boy of IEBC, but Jubilee. Because the more we insist that this guy is as tainted as it can be, the more Jubilee insists that he should not get out of office. And look at how pedantic the response by IEBC is. They're saying, fine, you've made a very big complaint against Ezra Chiloba. This is how we've dealt with it. We have created a project.
Right.
So that there will be a project that is intended to work outside of the confine of supervision by Ezra Chiloba. But what do we see in the evening? Ezra Chiloba appears on JK Live and says, I'm fully in charge. I'll be in charge of this election. I'm not going anywhere. Forget about those projects. A clear indicator that Wafula Chebukati, despite his perceived intention to enable a free and fair election, is always being short-circuited by the Jubilee administration, who have installed Ezra Chiloba there with a specific mandate of ensuring that the outcome of this election tilts in their favor. So to that extent, it becomes quite clear that the most contentious issue that relates to Ezra Chiloba is one that must be determined with finality now. Because look at the manner in which Chiloba has handled himself. He says that, look, the decision by the Supreme Court in validating this election was based substantially on forged, on forged documents. And as I've indicated much earlier, what was forged before the Supreme Court were the documents evidencing the declaration of the results. And that was the report that was submitted by the Supreme Court. That report was tabled before the court, and all the advocates for the parties were given an opportunity to submit on it. We didn't hear any argument whatsoever from the part of the IEBC or let alone Jubilee that the report was based on forged document. But much later, when an inquiry is supposed to be undertaken on the IEBC, now they turn the table and start pointing their finger at the registrar of the Supreme Court. Now, what other explanation do you require for you to get satisfied that Ezra Chiloba is not an individual who should be sitting in the offices of the IEBC as we progress towards this expected election?
There's been a lot of criticism from Jubilee that NASA is using unconstitutional means to hound out these IEBC officers out of office. You know, the very fact that you're out demonstrating. And many have said, according to Supreme Court judgment, the court made it clear that evidence was not tendered sufficient enough to warrant the resignation of Ezra Chiloba. Your response to that?
Well, let me deal with this argument in two ways. First, it is the constitutional right of every Kenyan, be it an individual or an organization, to demonstrate. And these demonstrations, as initially intended by the NASA coalition, was to indicate to the entire Kenyan public and the entire world their dissatisfaction in the manner in which IEBC is supposed to work. And you see, preceding that, that quest for the demonstration, there was already a petition that had been made to the IEBC itself, demanding that certain irreducible minimum requirements be made. There was already a complaint that was made to the Director of Public Prosecution, listing certain individuals with culpability who needed to be investigated. So to that extent, therefore, it cannot be said that NASA is adopting means that are not provided for in the Constitution. Now, the person who who is jettisoning the rights set out in the Constitution? The Jubilee administration, because what do? They conglomerate a criminal gang of Mungiki, they christen the business community in Nairobi.
Do you have evidence of this?
Of course we have evidence. It's as clear as daylight. One of the policemen who was in a helmet in the course of the scuffle, the helmet fell off and he had dreadlocks. Which policeman has dreadlocks? It never happens. These are Mungiki criminals. And these are sent to interfere with an otherwise peaceful demonstration. Then the police come in, they lob tear gas. And let me tell you, Michelle, even the other day, on Thursday, when we were in Kibera before the court, the police lobbed tear gas in a courtroom. Was there necessity for things like this? So in a peaceful environment, as peaceful as a courtroom, tear gas being lobbed, for what purpose?
Right.
And we come and again see the same thing being repeated in the streets. So that issue must be settled. Another point is this. The Supreme Court was not undertaking a criminal investigation of culpability of the individuals. In fact, that was not any of the complaints by Raila Odinga in his petition. Raila's petition was quite straight and to the point. It related to the invalidation of this election of President Uhuru Kenyatta. And then after that is done, it is the mandate of the Director of Public Prosecution as well as the Director of Criminal Investigation to do a criminal inquiry. And it cannot be said that this inquiry is not with any basis. As we speak right now, there are several election officials who are facing criminal prosecution. So it becomes quite clear that the arguments, the complaint by the NASA coalition, that the 12 principal individuals coupled with the other 60 subsidiary individuals and any other individuals who have been mentioned as having played a big role in bungling this election must leave office.
All right, and I'll come back to that. My next question to you would be whether there have been conclusive reports on the investigations on these 12 individuals to warrant their hounding out of office, or what basis then is NASA using to hound Ezra Chiloba out of office, if you rightly put it, that the Supreme Court was not judging on the culpability of individuals. But we'll come back to that. Senator, let's get your response on this. IEBC says, NASA wants a removal of the top IEBC CEO, but we instead have a project team which will be leading this election. IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba will not be at the center stage of this. Do you think this is a good means for IEBC to try get a consensus with some of NASA's demands?
Thank you very much. What I want to insist is Jubilee is not an extension of IEBC. The IEBC is the only body that is mandated to conduct an election, and it is an independent body. Number two, I've heard and I have tremendous respect for Wakil Harvey. He has made appear that Ezra Chiloba and the 12 officials are guilty. What happened to presumption of innocence? Why is it NASA behaving as if Ezra Chiloba and the rest of officials that allegedly, because he has agreed that the Supreme Court was not their duty, they are under investigation. Why is it that they are behaving as if the officials are already killed? And therefore, they don't have any basis. The Jubilee does not hold brief for Ezra Chiloba. We have not. In fact, what they are busy doing is they have decided to brand the IEBC officials to be linked to Jubilee for them, because they say a drowning man clutches to any straw. And therefore, all these issues you are seeing, the officials are being fought, officials are being done this, the police are doing this, I can tell you for free. The IEBC official, and that is why we don't want to make. And you see, some of these things, history, we learn from history. In 2007, when I myself and even the Kalenjin community supported Raila, the elections at that time, it was said it was mangled. He went again after the immediate former chairman, the late Samuel Kivuitu. In 2013, when he lost to Uhuru Muigai Kenyatta and William Ruto, he went against Isaac Hassan-led commission. In 2017, when he lost again on August very badly, he is going now after Ezra Chiloba. I have never seen a player who always fails and goes after referee. So all these issues, when you look, it is their signature. And when you hear going down to demonstrations, I agree it is their right under the Constitution. But their signature of demonstration and chaos, and you saw in Kisumu, you saw in everywhere, is chaos. And when they say there is a business community and there is allegedly a criminal gang, but Christine, the Nairobi business community. Those are serious, wild allegations that they cannot substantiate because we have never seen them reporting to Inspector Police, IG, or any of the investigatory agencies that we have in this country. So some of these issues cannot, you can see now, they decided to use university students to demonstrate. Right. And when the police went in and tried and quell, some of these people are now rebranding themselves as these, they are peaceful demonstrators, but most of them are the signature of NASA, right. Or even is always chaos.
Just to ask you, because we'll have to hear from Nelson Harvey, as to what, what evidence and what conclusive investigation they are going on, asking for the removal of these 12 officials. But NASA also cites issues of perception. Ezra Chiloba was still the CEO of the electoral body during the 2013 elections that led oversaw the elections using the Isaac Hassan team that was later handed out. He was also at the helm of the Electoral Commission during the August 8th elections. Irregularities and illegalities had been pointed out by the court. On the front page of The Nation today, we're seeing several individuals, junior officials, however, of the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission facing criminal charges of bungling this election. But these officials were working under they were being overseen by IEBC CEO Ezra Chiloba. So 2 general elections, irregularities have been mentioned in these 2 general elections, and the IEBC CEO has nothing to do with it?
No, I agree. Some of these, the IEBC itself, and Wafula Chebukati went retreat to Naivasha, he has told the country that him and the commission and secretariat led by CEO have striked and ensured a working relationship to ensure the process is credible. The issue is, and that is why we need to be cautious in this country, we cannot go into business of making some of these independent commissions to be the graveyard of most of the careers of some of the civil servants. Because the moment, we always shout and say, so-and-so in guilt. Why? I saw NASA the other day when the Supreme Court ruled in their favor. They were very excited and told Jubilee, no, can you respect the independence of judiciary? Can you respect the rule of law? Because we allowed them. They went to court. We told them the decision is, we don't agree with it, but we respect it. But now they are busy making sure that Chiloba and company, which of course I don't all brief for them, is guilty, and they are creating perception. Why don't they allow, as they have said themselves, they have initiated private prosecution, or they have reported to DPP to do its work? Why don't we allow the entire judicial process to be concluded so that we also give time, because there is a principle of presumption of innocence. And NASA has always been saying they are champions of rule of law. Why do they want to use jungle law to hound out some of these officials? They are also Kenyans. They have a right to serve, but we must respect their independence and their role as the officials that work with the independent constitutions that we have. And Jubilee, we have respected that.
Harvey, he has a point. Demonstration and picketing is a constitutional right that NASA has, but hounding an individual out of office also has a constitutional process. What constitutional process has NASA followed in hounding out these officials? What conclusive investigations have been done to show that Ezra Chiloba and these 11 other officials are indeed culpable?
We have not said in any way whatsoever that these individuals are guilty. We have said that evidence tendered before the court and now a complaint submitted to the Director of Public Prosecution indicates that they hold the highest responsibility of culpability. And what happens when you are in public service? If a complaint has been lodged against you and is being investigated, you cannot be in office. You have to step aside. We saw it with James Oswago. When a complaint had been raised against him in respect of the Chicken Gate scandal, he stepped aside. In fact, by the time he was being charged, he had already stepped aside. Now, we have individuals led by Ezra Chiloba, and permit me to say, this is a strong word, but it must be said. It's a criminal gang of individuals within the IEBC who hold the highest responsibility for the mess we are now. They don't want to leave. They are still in the crime scene. They are tampering with evidence because, and I've given you immediately before, the clearest evidence that Ezra Chiloba is tampering with evidence. He's come out, and the position he holds is a very big position. He comes out and says without blinking, the Supreme Court relied on forged documents. Ezra Chiloba is a lawyer, for heaven's sake. He's somebody I know very well from law school. I think his training in law is not one that can be doubted. But for him to jump to such a ridiculous conclusion It can only be understood that he's singing somebody's song or is just outrightly mad. That is one aspect of it. Now, the other issue that my friend Sam has said here, that why don't we table evidence to the police about this criminal gang that camouflages as the business community? We are saying that it is the police and the Jubilee administration that has given police uniform to the criminal gang. How do you want us to report to them? How do you expect us to get a bona fide response? It cannot happen. We can only make this noise. And look at the manner in which...
But have you tabled that evidence even for the public to know? Because Kenyans are only hearing this, but not seeing this evidence.
Michelle, this evidence is there. You see, when he claims that he doesn't see the evidence, it reminds me of that lady in Mombasa Road who has put his maize out to dry. And he's seeing the clouds coming. It doesn't want to remove the maize because there's no evidence that it's going to rain until it rains. Look, Mheshimiwa, it's going to rain, and you can see the cloud. The magnitude of the cloud tells you the amount of rain. So the fact of this matter is as close as it is, Michelle. We have seen, and even you here at KTN have played these clips of that policeman in dreadlocks. We have seen these clips of policemen entering prefabs A, brutalizing students there. They are telling us that this is fake. Is it a video creation? We have seen the policemen entering the Design Institute, clobbering students, beating up lecturers. Again, they insist this is not evidence. If you're dealing with an administration that does not want to admit anything that is as clear as daylight, how can you again say you must go back to the institutions within that administration to investigate? They can't investigate.
Right.
Yes.
But does the law provide for that without, I mean, because at the end of the day, there is presumption of innocence until proven guilty. Does the law legally, is it a legal provision that because there is clouds, it's going to rain, this person needs to go?
Yes, the law provides for that. And I speak with a lot of experience as a lawyer and as a scholar. You see, the law was made by man. The law is supposed to facilitate the function and the operation of man in a society. It is man that determines that because of the cohesion that we want, we shall elect or appoint one amongst ourselves to rule us. And if that individual does not comply with the dictates of man, then man has the right to put aside the law and say the individual we've given the responsibility of taking care of our affairs has abused the law. And how do we remedy that situation? We need to remove him, we need to put aside the law, and we need to make reform to ensure that the individual we've put in office does not use the law to the detriment of the society. And that is exactly the position in which Kenya is right now.
All right. Senator, let's hear from you before we take a break.
No, the issue is I'm surprised because the same people are allegedly saying there is an organized criminal gang that is being used by police. And yet, you know, they are masters of double speak. They don't want to report to the agencies that is the creation
We are saying
of the law.
report to the gang because that is the gang itself.
The government cannot be the gang. How can you? You must respect, as a lawyer, you must respect the constitution and the government, the executive, the police, a whole creation of the law. Why are you not want to report? The Inspector General of Police in some interview.
You see what Mheshimiwa?
We having, can you protect me, Michelle, because he had his own time. What we are saying, the Inspector Police General said in some leading station on Sunday that the police and even the Wananchi like him, a very good citizen and a law-abiding citizen, have a right to report. Some of these imaginations are creation of social media. They are propaganda because you can do what we call, there is what you can do in computer. You can do graphics and create some funny, and the police. We have seen some of these things that are being traded on social media originate from other countries. And therefore, if these guys respect the law, they know police, the investigating agencies in this country are creations of the law. Why don't they report to the police? The police has never been a criminal gang. And I would like my brother, as he has said, after this show, he should go to the CID headquarters and write a statement. He is a man of a good legal repute. And I want we respect him. But the issue of casting aspersions and saying the police is a criminal gang is not there nor there. And that lacks the respect. It shocks us because they are interested in coming to government. And they are now accusing the police and security agencies that the criminal gang. Does it mean in an event, of course they will not win, that they get into the government. Will they sack all the policemen and security agencies that we have and apparatus in this country? We should respect the security agencies we have in this country, and everybody as a Kenyan. You are a Kenyan, I am a Kenyan. We have a right to respond to the police. And these are the same people who are accusing the police. But the media sometimes have also tried to show the good side of the police. So when they say allegedly we have a criminal gang who is Christian business community, who is wearing police uniform, we want to see some of this. We are also Kenyans. We will not use propaganda and perception and gossip to run our security apparatus in this country.
Let's stop it, gentlemen. Let's take a short break here on Morning Express. This is our State of the Nation discussion. At this point, we'd like to release our viewers watching us on KTN Home. Life and Style is coming up next, but the State of the Nation discussion continues in just a minute on KTN News.